Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. It's been another colorful Vermont autumn with our landscape awash in reds, greens, and yellows. As you've been enjoying the breathtaking color, you might sometimes wonder, why do the leaves change color? And why are some years different than others? More than a decade ago, an undergraduate student at UVM began exploring the science of fall foliage and maple trees. She's now one of the top maple and foliage experts in the country, and she is continuing her research at the Proctor Maple Research Center in Underhill, where she spoke with Across the Fence's Rebecca Gollin.
My name is Dr. Abby Vandenberg. I am a research assistant professor here at the University of Vermont Proctor Maple Research Center. What I do here is research on all aspects of maple trees and maple syrup production. I specialize in the physiology of maple trees and also in the chemistry and the composition and flavor of maple syrup, and particularly how processing impacts those variables.
Tell us a little bit about your work in the past studying foliage.
When I was an undergraduate forest biology major here at the School of Natural Resources at UVM, I wanted to do a senior research project, an honors thesis, and I was working with a faculty member named Doc Donnelly, who many people know, and he really wanted me to do a study looking at the physiology of fall color, in particular in maple trees, since it was such an important economic driver for the state. And so this journey began, this very long journey later, began as a senior thesis project at the University of Vermont, and I was looking for a field site to do some of my research as an undergraduate, and I was turned on to some ongoing phenology plots here at the Proctor Maple Research Center. And one thing led to another, and I ended up using the Proctor Center as my field site to study the physiological factors underlying fall color in sugar maple, and that was my senior project, and that was my first introduction to the Proctor Center. So following that, I ended up doing a master's thesis on the factors that control the expression of color in sugar maple. Then I also I followed that up with a doctoral dissertation research on the physiology of the anthocyanin pigments, the pigments that are responsible for the red colors in leaves. So it all started as a senior project that not only got me into looking at fall color and the physiology of fall color, but also introduced me to the Proctor Center. And I managed to end up back here as a technician and then doing my dissertation research while I worked here.
Tell me a little bit about the science that makes fall foliage happen.
Well, it's really something that we know lots about and a little about all at the same time. So there are two processes that go on as leaves change color in the fall, and they go on sort of simultaneously. The first is the loss of chlorophyll. So as a response to the signal of shortening day lengths, and also it's kind of modulated by temperatures and some other weather conditions, but mostly it's in response to the cue of shortening photoperiods or day length. The chlorophyll in the leaf begins, first the leaf stops making new chlorophyll, and then at the same time the leaf is also breaking down the chlorophyll that's there. So that's what we begin to see, the reduction in green. And as that chlorophyll begins to get broken down by the leaf, there are pigments that are present in the leaf all the time. Predominantly they're yellow in color. They're accessory pigments called carotenoids. And even though they're there in the leaf all the time, they are masked because chlorophyll has so much higher absorption than the carotenoids. So as that chlorophyll begins to break down, the yellow pigments that are there all along get revealed. So in a lot of species of trees, like some of the ones behind me here, that's really the only process that goes on when it comes to fall color. The breakdown and removal of the green and the exposure of the yellow and sometimes the orange that's already there. So that's step one. And then in a lot of other species, there's this secondary process that is interrelated but also having nothing to do with the loss of chlorophyll. And that is that these leaves are producing anthocyanin pigments during that fall leaf senescence process. So in these leaves, these anthocyanin pigments, which are generally red and sometimes orange or even blue or purple in color, these pigments are being created. So while the rest of the leaf is busy dying and getting ready to die and fall off, there are active process of synthesis, biosynthesis going on in these leaves. So, and these pigments, these new red anthocyanin pigments are being formed. So in species like sugar maple, red maple especially, ash, that purple color, those are all the results of these anthocyanin pigments being formed.
Some years it seems more vibrant or less vibrant. Is there a reason for that?
When you think about it, there are so many different factors that impact the colors that we see. So it isn't necessarily just about how much anthocyanin is formed in a particular leaf, so how much red there is. That interplays with how much chlorophyll has been lost already, or either the red can be formed sort of on top of the green and that changes the color that we see. And it also interplays with the conditions that we're seeing as a backdrop. So cloudy days actually often can give the most vibrant foliage because of just the contrast that we're seeing. You can have situations like this where this leaf has already undergone some tissue death here at the edge, at the leaf margin. So you can see this kind of brown showing up here. So the extent to which this has happened in a leaf can also impact the overall visual appearance that we see. So there's a lot going on, and then some of it is sheerly due to the contrasting conditions of what we see. So on a hillside where you have a lot of, say, white birch trees as part of the landscape, or even a backdrop of dark green evergreen trees, that can really influence what we're seeing. So in part there's physiological things going on that have to do with the colors that we see and the clarity and the hues, but then there is also just the other impacts of other factors that we see along with that. So it's a really complex question, and that's why really like the simplest answer is that you're always going to have hits or misses. In many ways, there's not such a thing as a good year or a bad year for fall color. You're always going to have these sort of both magical pockets of good color and also times. Like there might be 2 days where color in one spot looks absolutely like the most spectacular thing you've ever seen, and then it's gone.
Why do we have such great color here and in this region?
There's a couple of factors that play into that. First and foremost is the mix of species that we have. So say in areas where forests are very oak dominated, oaks have some nice color, of course, but they don't tend to have the same kind of richness in reds and oranges that we have in some of our species that are really dominant in northern hardwood forests, like sugar maples and red maples. And then the mix of species is also not just a part of what we see in terms of what leaves do. So we have a lot of leaves that make brilliant reds and purples, so we have maples and ashes making those, and then we have yellows of birches and beeches and things like that. So that's leaf color, but we also have this great mixture of contrasting species that make a good contrast in the background. So our birches with their white bark, and some of our evergreen species, some spruces and firs that are often in the background sort of on a landscape level, really provide a lot of contrast, and so what we see is really spectacular. And then we also, so it's not just the species we have, but we also have this predisposition to weather that is known to promote the formation of anthocyanin synthesis. So cold temperatures can often boost anthocyanin production during fall senescence. So we do have a lot of that. So it's interesting how the unique conditions in the fall that are unique to Vermont and are kind of predispose us to have good fall coloration. We also have the other side of that in spring. We have a unique set of weather conditions in the springtime that allow for Vermont to have really good conditions for sap to flow. So it's kind of interesting how we have the best of those two worlds here in the same state.
Science aside, it's a magical time of the year. You see people pulling over their cars to take pictures, and obviously a ton of people come into the state to be tourists at this time of the year. What do you think is so special about fall and fall foliage and the colors that we see?
I really think that it's more of a full five senses experience. It's not just the visual cues that you're seeing, but it's also the smells that you're smelling, the temperatures that are out there, those crisp, wonderful, sort of cool fall days, but that are bright and sunny. It's sort of a magical feast for our senses, and we do it. The climate here and the environment here, the landscape here, really gives us the best of all of that. Add to that our landscape in general, our mountains and our hillsides that we see. It gives us nice vantage points for looking and experiencing all of that. So, I think that really plays into how it is such a magical time here.
And our thanks to Abby for taking the time to help explain some of the science behind fall foliage. Leaves weren't the only things falling when wind speeds of up to 85 miles an hour hit parts of the region last week. Uprooted trees, broken trunks, and downed branches are reminders of the high winds. Across the Fence spoke with Vermont's urban and community forestry outreach specialist about cleaning up.
So after any storm, the best advice is really to be safe. We want to make sure that homeowners are going out and being safe, or when they go out into the woods or into their yard, that they're thinking about safety. We say look up, obviously, for widowmakers to make sure that there's no hazards that are, in the tree. Also looking up for any live wires, and also looking down for any live wires. And then also just in terms of any of the debris, any of the branches or debris that's on the ground. Sometimes live wires can be hidden under branches or in brush. So to really assess the situation before they start taking any action or start moving any debris. One of the first questions that we ask people is, in general, is a tree healthy and vigorous, or was it healthy and vigorous before the storm hit? Trees are amazing in their ability to handle a little bit of damage, to seal off wounds that are created as a result of storm events. We start by asking them to just do kind of a quick assessment. Is a tree vigorous and healthy other than storm damage? How many branches have been broken? If there's probably, rule of thumb that we use is if 50% or more of the canopy has been damaged or, as a result of the storm, that's time to consider whether or not the tree should come out. One of the things that we encourage homeowners to do is to do a quick risk assessment. So if a tree is leaning over your house, that's obviously a different situation than if it's leaning, across your dooryard or your driveway. So one of the first things that after a storm event like this happens, we ask people to do a quick risk assessment of any of the damage around their house. If there's limbs hanging over their roof or over a garage or something like that, that's certainly a different situation than if there's limbs just hanging over their backyard. In terms of hiring a professional, in the urban and community forestry world, we recommend that people work with an ISA, which stands for International Society of Arboriculture Certified Arborist. There's information online, and you can go to our website to find a link to be able to find an arborist in your area. The thing about using a certified arborist is that this is somebody who's trained, they've gone through professional development, and that they're continually trained so that they're up to date in terms of the research and best practices around tree care. So we encourage people to start with a professional. When you're looking to try to figure out how much it's going to cost you, it really depends on the job. Every job is different. Every amount of storm damage is different. Depends, and the type of damage can affect the cost. So it's really important to contact professionals, have them come out and do an assessment, and give you an estimate as to what the job will cost. We encourage homeowners to do anything from the ground. So with your feet on the ground, there's a lot of things that you can do to clean up from storm damage. One thing in particular is to help repair or address any broken limbs or any tree branches that have been broken as a result of the storm. One of the simplest things is to actually make a proper pruning cut of a jagged branch, and that'll allow the tree to seal over that wound and heal a lot quicker than just leaving a broken branch. The other thing I like to encourage homeowners, though, is, again, bringing it back to safety is, if you are working under a tree, to consider wearing a helmet and face shields as well. And if the homeowner is interested in doing any more work, like cutting up, blocking up tip overs, using chainsaws and that, always using your personal protective equipment, like your chaps, obviously ears and eye and head protection as well.
There's going to be lots of brush piles. What can be done with these brush piles, and what are they good for?
One of the things that we like to encourage homeowners to think about is, with all this brush that's down, obviously you can use it for firewood if you burn wood at your house, but there's also an opportunity to take it out into the woods and create little brush piles for critters. Brush piles like this make wonderful habitat for small critters in the woods, if you have a little area in your backyard that you want to encourage wildlife, these brush can be piled up and can make a nice home for something out there. We're seeing more and more of these types of storms, these smaller kind of, or more localized, I should say, events. We're seeing a lot of windstorms and obviously rain events throughout the state. Now we're moving into fall and ice storm season is upon us, or is coming upon us. So I think, being prepared and thinking about the trees in your yard or around your house, and thinking about what you can do for preventative maintenance in terms of regular pruning, hiring an arborist to come out and do an assessment to look at the health and vitality of your trees, and to address any health issues or any structural issues. One of the things that we see with these storms is that a lot of times the branches that break are because there's a structural issue that can be addressed through regular pruning or preventative pruning early on, especially in the tree's life, when you're making smaller cuts, and the tree can seal over that wound a lot quicker and grow a healthier form that'll be more resilient in a future storm.
And Kate's final word of advice: call a professional, especially if there are safety concerns. That's our program for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.